Today's Limitless guest is Dame Stephanie Shirley, a woman whose life from kindertransport refugee to philanthropist has required her to overcome prejudice and sexism. Declining botany as her only science degree available to her on leaving school, she pursued evening classes to achieve her honours degree in mathematics, and soon after her newfound love of software blossomed. With a starting capital of £6, she founded her company, Overcoming Sexism, by only employing women. She went on to take her company public, valued at several billion pounds some years later. Her only women company, one of the first social change organisations, pioneered new working schedules, flexible working and freelance contracts, breaking ground and providing freedom for women employees. For this, she was recognised with an OBE, a Companion of Honour and a Damehood. And not one to shy from challenge, Dame Stephanie famously adopted the name Steve to access the city executives, knowing that they would refuse her invitation to meet if they knew she was a woman. Her story is quite remarkable, and I'm honoured to be talking with her today. Dame Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for a lovely introduction.
Dame Stephanie, we're approaching the anniversary of the Kindertransport Initiative. For those who are less familiar with that, could you just outline what that entailed and how that impacted you as a 5-year-old?
Well, the history is that as Nazism spread across Europe, it's always very difficult, sorry. The Kindertransport, which means children's train, was set up in 1938 after the conditions in mainland Europe became so difficult that it was obviously the beginning of barbarism, and we had to get out to save our lives. My father got out first. He was the Jewish one. My mother was not Jewish. As far as Hitler was concerned, you were Jewish if you had 1/16 Jewish blood in you. And it was organized, it was set up by the Jewish people themselves, but financed by the Catholics, who really funded it very generously. The Quakers did a great deal, and certainly the train that I came out on was specifically funded by the Quakers. And it was a rescue mission that had about 10, 12 trains from different parts of Europe, bringing out children aged 5 to 16 and bringing them to England, who had pre-agreed that they would take these children in as long as they were not a pressure on the state. So that my foster parents were organized. We knew the name, very English, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It sounded very reassuring. Guy and Ruby Smith, they were wonderful. But they sponsored us and made sure that the state was not picking up our education costs, which in those days had to be paid for. So it was it was the largest ever recorded migration of children ever in history. It really was. 10,000 of us came in over a period of 10 months. My train was from Vienna, and I can sort of vaguely remember the departure, but I can certainly remember the journey and the arrival. It was very dramatic on Vienna. It's a very big station, the railway station, and families were crying and wailing, which I'd never really heard before, as they said goodbye to the children. And our parents really had hopes, but thought they probably would never see us again. So the drama of that was sort of permeated the whole thing. The journey took about 2.5 days. We had about 1,000 children on our train, with, believe it or not, just 2 adults. And it was sort of fairly chaotic. I was with my older sister, who was 9 years old, so she, poor thing, had the responsibility of looking after me. We slept on rolls of corrugated cardboard on the floor, on the benches, in the overhead luggage racks as well. I can't remember what we ate, because I remember the childish things. I remember losing my doll. We each could take out what we could carry, and a 5-year-old can't carry very much because I had a doll. And somehow I lost the doll, and she was later found, and she's now in the V&A Museum of Childhood. She's safe there. I think her name was Ruth. I lost Ruth. I remember the little boy who kept being sick, and I mean kept being sick. It seemed to be continuous. And I even think I remember his name, Peter. But it was a real traumatic 2.5 days. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know where we were going. And of course, when we arrived at Liverpool Street Station, what I remember there was that how silent everything was. Have I misremembered that? Because it's very difficult to remember things without them being garbled by wishful thinking, things that one's read and so on. What is the truth? What do I remember? And I remember arriving at this silent platform. And now, of course, I know that we were all traumatized, and we literally were just stumbling out of the train, and we're shepherded into a vast hall where we were sort of organized and picked up, and like so many pieces of unwanted luggage.
Gosh, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. And it is traumatic. It's traumatic hearing it. But you describe the years that subsequently passed in your schooling as being quite peaceful and tranquil, where you seemed to flourish and had new and different opportunities.
I was very, very lucky in my foster parents, who gave me unconditional love. And although they were not in any way intellectuals, they were loving, happy couple, childless couple. So they really didn't know how to deal with two traumatized children who, of course, couldn't speak English. They really gave me what I needed. They gave me structure, they gave me security, they gave me love, and they provided education at a grammar school level, which I had to get a scholarship for, but I was a bright child. And I sort of knew that education was the way out of poverty. And I sort of knew that I had to get on my own feet and become a person that makes things happen rather than has things happen to me. And when you're a refugee, you're dumped from here to here. Now you go there, and now you go. No, this is, I like to control my own life, and as I say, business has been very good for me. I love to learn. I really like to do new things, and I just feel I've been very, very fortunate. I'm now a happy person. But I had the most terrible trauma left from my refugee start. I had 6 years of analysis at the Tavistock Clinic to get me out of that. And I had what's called survivor guilt, where somehow I was so conscious that, why was I saved when 1 million children died? And well-meaning adults did say to me as a 5-year-old, aren't you lucky to be saved? Aren't you lucky to be saved? And indeed I was. But that's not a good thing to say to a child. And you finished up needing to justify my own survival.
If I'm right in saying, Dame Stephanie, you've galvanized that thought, and you've been quoted as saying you decided then that yours was going to be a life worth saving, and that your life was going to be purposeful as a consequence of that. That is a remarkable thing for a young child, to that self-awareness and determination. Obviously, your experiences have shaped that, but that is something that has really been a part of your DNA.
Yes, and it's as strong today as it was 80 years ago. And that's what amazes me. I still feel I don't want to fritter the day away. I want to fill it with meaningful activity. I want to do something that makes the world a better place. And so philanthropy has, one a counteraction to counteract depression. Giving is to other people is very, very important. And I must say, since I've started my philanthropy, which is now 30 or 40 years or something, I really am a very happy person. I look forward to getting up each day and enjoy it. I'm busy. I'm still working, not at perhaps the same level of performance, but I certainly put the effort in.
It definitely shows. It certainly comes through in all of the research that I've done. That's a resounding characteristic, is that self-contentment, contentment and happiness. If I can just touch on, you were able to do your mathematics studies, but had to go and do that at the boys' school, and then I'm starting to get a bit of a pattern here that your aspirations were not going to be restricted by your environment. You were going to achieve regardless, but you continue to find obstacles, that women weren't expected to do certain things, and that you were going to be held back or restricted or stopped even. Tell me about that.
I'm of a generation where women really were second-class citizens. We were legally disallowed from doing certain functions. We were restricted. The men were in the default position for everything. Women were sort of very much afterthoughts. I really got, I think, having had problems with anti-Semitism, I was determined not then to succumb to sexism. And you can make a little joke of it, and when you're young and pretty, and you can get through some of it. It's not too embarrassing. Then you realize, up with this I will not put. And I want to, if I meet a barrier like my school doesn't teach mathematics, then you actually argue, well, where can I learn mathematics? Because that's what I want to do. And similarly, when my boss wouldn't put me up for promotion when I was in the civil service, that was clear sexism. What did I do? I applied for the job as an outside candidate, and I got it. So that, I became a graduate worker in the same, or managing some of the team that I had been part of earlier. I do like to. It's not that I like to fight, but I like to determine my own future. I'm the master of my own fate.
Indeed, and that fight seems to be about identifying injustice, because as you were progressing your career and working in technology and computer organizations, and your love of software developed, you were starting to hit the glass ceiling. And I think you famously say that the shapes of women's heads is flat because we're constantly being patted down and discouraged and not allowed. But with £6, you did start your own company, and to overcome that, you only employed women. Tell me about that decision, because that was pretty radical at the time.
Yes, unlike most businesses, I did not start it in order to make money. I would have liked to have earned a bit of a salary, but my husband was in full employment and we lived on his salary. So I really wanted to create an environment that was suitable for me and for other women, but by which I mean flexible to the extreme, family friendly. And so when I set up the company called Freelance Programmers, which was exactly what it was when it started, the minute number one in the company's annals was to say that the employment policy was to provide work, to provide work for women with children who are unable to work in a conventional environment. And that we interpreted that as a sort of cottage industry. We all work from home. In those days, you didn't have computers or iPhones or anything like that. We insisted that people had a simple telephone. And if they didn't have a telephone, we wouldn't employ them. But it was very much a sort of feminist direction. And of the first 300 staff, 297 were women. And it's interesting to look back. We had a wonderful culture. We built on the strengths of I think our stereotypically female strengths. We work in teams. We were perfectionists, that the work went out at a high level of professionalism, and irrespective of how difficult we found to do it. I can remember when the cat walked across my papers, and this was before the days of photocopiers or before the days of email, and so it had to be retyped. Life was, the way in which software was done was, we would, given a task, we would work with pencil and paper, writing sort of flow charts, defining exactly how that task should be done. And then we wrote code, usually machine code, sometimes binary, which was then sent to a third-party data center where it was punched and then repunched in order to verify. And then it would be submitted to the computer. And our schedules were based on 2 such accesses to the computer a week. Now, you compare that with how we write software these days, it's unheard of. But it has the same sort of excitement. It's problem solving, it's pattern recognition. I could not believe that I should be paid so well when I was in employment for something that I enjoyed so much as software. And we tried to give that enjoyment. We had so much fun in that company. We worked incredibly hard, but we did have fun, and we supported each other. We had a reunion a couple of years ago, and there's still a wonderful feeling of friendship among all these bright women.
And it was a crusade, whether it was intentional or not. It became a groundbreaking model for effective working. And there's perhaps 2 things I'd like to touch on. One is the fact that women's characteristics of being very pragmatic and multitasking and being able to do this type of work, very logical and deliver to a high quality of perfectionism. It's ironic to think that women were excelling in this, and not that many men were in software. And yet now when we look at the industry, the balance has changed quite significantly. Why is that? What's your view on that?
Well, historically, of course, Bletchley Park Coding Centre during the war was predominantly thousands of female staff doing the equivalent of coding. What happened was that I think once people realized how interesting programming and software was, and how well it was paid, the men started coming in. And there are instances of women training their successors, who then came in at a much higher salary and became the manager of the software department, whereas previously they had been outsiders. It's a funny history. More currently, Leeds University, Leeds Beckett, which used to be Leeds Metropolitan, is just starting a study of what happened to the gender ratio in my company, because it did start all female. We always had a few men. After the equal opportunities legislation came in 1975, then we started employing men on a 50-50 basis. And so gradually the ratios got right. And we had several years where we were the classic 80-20 mix by gender, but it was 80% female and 20% male. And we stuck at that for some years. But then the company started making acquisitions and so on, and it finished up really as just a quality corporate with more women perhaps in senior positions than is expected. But it has lost, and we don't know, and that's what Leeds is really going to study. What happened? Why did it happen? Was it management? Was it growth? Was it inevitable?
I think that research should be something that would be of interest to many organisations. It must have been immensely satisfying to take your company public, having been told many times the rhetoric of, well, that's fine, an all-women company for a small organisation, or that's okay, it's just getting a little bit bigger and it's scaling. But when it floats on the stock exchange for several billion, that must have had a sense of Well, there you go.
I'm enormously proud of it. But I was retired by then. It was professional managers who did that and in fact made my fortune. I started it off, I moved it into co-ownership, but when it floated, I was no longer even on the board. Was long retired. I retired in 93 and we floated in 96.
So still satisfying, but and of course now you get to benefit from that, from all of your hard work. One of the things that really struck me, and I think this is really poignant, and you are famously known now as Steve, Shirley, as a consequence of knowing that executives would not accept your invitation to a meeting if they knew you were a woman. Now, we can be as forceful as we want, but actually not changing your name, but adopting a new name to secure the meeting with executives, budget holders, people who needed to hear your story, needed to know what you could sell them and what value you could bring to their business. That's quite courageous. Tell me about that.
I'm not the only person to have done that. Look at J.K. Rowling, who felt that she wouldn't get published if she used her first name, which I'm not even sure that I know. She's always known as J.K. Rowling because she dissembled. And women, I think, have to make sure that we are always presenting at the very best level we can, because I do believe that people are waiting to shoot us down. And to get through that, we have to be employed, engaged on merit, not just to make the numbers up.
In your organization, you pioneered different operating models, different ways of working, flexible working, part-time working, working from home. This was in the 70s. And here we are coming out of a global pandemic where we've all had to adapt to working from home. And organizations now are talking about flexible working as if it's new, and it's not new. Why did it take 50, 60 years for organizations to realize that flexible working is better for everybody?
Changing cultures does take a long time. I mean, I'm always very impatient, but it does always take a long time. Sometimes it takes a generation, as this particular change has required. The culture of an organization comes from its leadership. And when the leadership was male, it didn't really want to change and didn't really want to bring women in. And they certainly didn't really want that flexibility. And it's taken a long time for good management, to move from presenteeism, you measure somebody and remunerate somebody because they're there, to being able to have metrics on performance and remunerate on achievements. And that has been true worldwide. It's not just in this country. Now, in the States, I think women are coming up much more strongly, and you see something very similar happen with the Black input into the labor force. I'm not working there at the moment, but when I was working there, you didn't count the number of women in a conference or in a meeting because it was roughly half and half. I mean, you just not memorable. But you did count, quite a few Black faces. That's good. And we still have to learn to deal with Black, Asian, Latino women who have even more difficulties than white women.
Indeed. You retired at 60 and have developed a new career as a philanthropist. And here we are approaching the end of June in the month of Pride, where we celebrate equality and recognition for all. You've described the challenges that you've experienced in your life of anti-Semitism and sexism and prejudice, etc. Where does the world go from here if we really are to have impact as a technology sector to improving the world?
I think technology does allow us to scale things. And this is where philanthropy is important, because philanthropy, you can see a problem, you can think about it, and you say, well, I'll try this on it, and I'll try that on it. And if it works, then the state can pick it up and deliver it nationwide or perhaps even globally. Somebody, though, has got to take that risk, and it's entrepreneurial types like me who do bet against the consensus and take a risk, and we sometimes win. I've had failures as well. I'm remembered for my successes, but I've had failures as well. The beauty of philanthropy is that there are no rules. You're not responsible for to shareholders. You have a trust deed. As long as you stay within that and within the law, of course, you can do what you like. And so I set up a company that was so different. I remember when the papers first came back from the solicitors, they were expressed in terms of musical things. They didn't understand what software was. And to set up that was a company. Similarly with charities, my first charity was very self-centered. It was to provide a long-term support and care and in a home for my own son, who was growing up and was in an asylum at the time. And I did get him out of the asylum and living with dignity in the community. And that charity, Autism at Kingwood, now supports 150 people of extreme vulnerability. And that's 24/7, and also keeps a weekly overview of another 100 people with autism, adults with autism, who in the main are able to live independently. And that gives me such satisfaction. It wasn't just that it was the right thing for my Jazi, but it was the right thing for lots of people. And I visited one of the homes recently, and it had such a lovely feel to it. And these are people that would normally be shut away. And we still have over 2,000 healthy people with autism. They are not sick. They are autistic, and they're still locked up in hospitals, and we have to get them out. And that charity is now working on some of the people coming out of Winterbourne Hospital, in the notorious Winterbourne Hospital. It's doing such good work, and I get such pleasure from it and such a feeling of satisfaction. Just got a new chairman coming in, and I'm able to help him with introducing him to the sector, because he's not an autism person, he's German. But I cannot be more. People think in terms of giving and philanthropy as a duty. As a good person, I should give my wealth away. But it's a pleasure. I do it because I want to. I do it. I get much more than I give. The biggest charity that I set up, and by that time it was 1997, was a school for autistic pupils. And that cost me 30 million and 5 years of my life, because had to buy property and had to recruit the initial staff and meet the startup losses, because we opened the school with 2 pupils and break even was 55 pupils. So, but as a venture philanthropist, which is what I call myself, it's very like running a business. You see problems, you have to meet them, the metrics are slightly different, that's all. But all the other skills and activities are identical. Marketing is called fundraising, things like that, but it's the same sort of thing, building relationships with people who can help you and want to contribute.
Indeed, that's that same mechanism in business. I've had the great opportunity through the Limitless forum to interview many entrepreneurs, and the unique characteristic that they all share is they never set out to become wealthy. They never set out because of the money. They set out to solve a problem. And you are a crusader. What is the next problem you're going to solve?
I think to go on working. I'm 87 now. I do get more tired than I used to. I have got domestic responsibilities that are quite difficult at the moment. But to keep sharp and keep contributing is a challenge for me. I'm conscious that I act as a role model for many women still, and that's true worldwide. That's quite a responsibility. So I feel that I have to make sure that my life is still. I'm earning my keep. I'm earning my keep in the world. That I'm not becoming a retired person.
You are a wonderful role model to many, many men and women, undoubtedly. What advice would you give your younger self, Dame Shirley?
I'm sure it's something to do with confidence, to actually know that I can do this. If I can't, I can ask somebody to help me, rather than as I was at 18. Oh, I couldn't possibly do that. Oh dear, no, I'm not. No. And to really have enough nous to push and project myself. Looking back on starting the business as well, I differentiated myself through our gender policy, but every business has to differentiate itself and do something different and do something that's worthwhile, not just tinker around the edges of a sector. You have to find something that is worth doing, and then it becomes a sheer joy.
Dame Shirley, your life has definitely been one that was worth saving. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.